Welcome, dear listener, to the extraordinary story of Albert Einstein, a man whose mind unlocked the deepest secrets of the universe and whose gentle spirit embodied the highest ideals of human curiosity and compassion. Tonight, we journey through the remarkable life of the greatest scientist of the modern age, a man who revolutionized our understanding of space, time, matter, and energy, while never losing his sense of wonder at the beauty and mystery of existence. As you settle into your comfortable position, allow your breathing to slow and deepen, like the gentle rhythm of light waves traveling through the cosmos, carrying information across vast distances at the speed that Einstein showed us is the ultimate constant of nature. Feel the tensions of the day fade away, replaced by the peaceful contemplation of a mind that saw the universe not as a collection of separate objects, but as a unified whole governed by elegant mathematical laws that reveal the profound interconnectedness of all things. Close your eyes and imagine yourself in Einstein's study at Princeton, surrounded by blackboards covered with equations that describe the curvature of space-time, the relationship between matter and energy, and the fundamental forces that govern the behavior of everything from subatomic particles to distant galaxies. The afternoon sunlight streams through the windows, illuminating the wild hair and kind eyes of a man who spent his life trying to understand what he called the Old One's design for the universe. We will follow Einstein's journey from his birth in the small German town of Ulm to his final years as the world's most famous scientist. A life that spanned the transformation of physics from a classical science based on Newton's absolute space and time to a relativistic science that revealed the universe to be far stranger and more wonderful than anyone had previously imagined. We will witness his transformation from a curious child who wondered what it would be like to ride alongside a beam of light, to the elderly sage who spent his final decades searching for a theory that would unify all the forces of nature. Let your mind drift like a photon, traveling through the fabric of space-time, past the patent office in Bern, where Einstein formulated his most revolutionary ideas, while examining applications for new inventions, past the lecture halls of Berlin, where he presented his general theory of relativity to audiences who struggled to comprehend its implications, past the ship that carried him to America as a refugee from Nazi persecution, seeking a new home where he could continue his quest to understand the fundamental nature of reality. Tonight, we will explore the paradoxes of this remarkable man, the theoretical physicist who unlocked the secrets of the atom, but spent his later years warning about the dangers of nuclear weapons, the pacifist who urged the United States to build the atomic bomb to prevent Nazi Germany from acquiring it first, the man who revolutionized our understanding of the universe while maintaining a childlike sense of wonder at its beauty and mystery. We will examine how his scientific discoveries emerged from his philosophical reflections on the nature of space and time, and how his humanitarian concerns grew from his deep conviction that all human beings are part of a larger cosmic community. This is the story of a man who showed us that the universe is far more strange and beautiful than we had ever imagined. That space and time are not fixed stages on which events unfold, but dynamic participants in the cosmic drama, and that matter and energy are different manifestations of the same underlying reality. As we journey through Einstein's remarkable life, let the story wash over you like gravitational waves rippling through space-time, carrying you peacefully toward the shores of sleep, while enriching your understanding of the cosmos and our place within it. Chapter 1: The Curious Child, 1879 to 1894. Our story begins on March 14, 1879, in the medieval city of Ulm, in the German state of Württemberg, where Albert Einstein was born into a middle-class Jewish family that valued education, intellectual curiosity, and the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake. The house where Einstein was born stood in the shadow of Ulm's magnificent Gothic cathedral, whose soaring spire had pointed toward the heavens for centuries, as if anticipating the arrival of a child who would one day unlock the secrets of the cosmos itself. Picture, if you will, the Germany of Einstein's birth, a newly unified nation that was rapidly industrializing and establishing itself as one of Europe's great powers, a land where scientific research and technological innovation were transforming society and creating new opportunities for those with the education and skills to take advantage of them. The German universities were the finest in the world, attracting students and scholars from across Europe and America, while German industry was pioneering new methods of manufacturing and engineering that would shape the modern world. Einstein's father, Hermann Einstein, was an engineer and entrepreneur who owned a small electrochemical factory that manufactured dynamos and electrical equipment for the growing market in electric lighting and power generation. Hermann was a gentle, optimistic man who possessed the practical intelligence of a successful businessman, combined with a deep appreciation for the theoretical knowledge that was transforming technology. His influence on young Albert was profound, instilling in him both a respect for practical problem solving and an understanding that the most important discoveries often emerge from abstract theoretical thinking. Einstein's mother, Pauline Koch Einstein, came from a prosperous family of grain merchants and brought to the Einstein household not only financial stability, but also a love of music and culture that would shape Albert's aesthetic sensibilities throughout his life. Pauline was an accomplished pianist who filled the house with the music of Bach, Mozart, and Beethoven, composers whose mathematical precision and emotional depth would later inspire Einstein's own approach to understanding the universe. Her influence on Albert's character was immeasurable, teaching him to appreciate beauty in all its forms and to see the connections between art, music, and the mathematical harmonies that govern the natural world. The Einstein family's move to Munich when Albert was 1 year old placed him in the heart of Bavaria's cultural and intellectual capital, a city that combined traditional German Gemütlichkeit with the progressive spirit of the late 19th century. Munich was home to excellent schools, museums, and cultural institutions, while the nearby Alps provided a constant reminder of the natural beauty that would always inspire Einstein's scientific work. The city's atmosphere of intellectual curiosity and cultural sophistication created the perfect environment for nurturing a mind that would one day revolutionize our understanding of the physical world. Picture young Albert in the family's comfortable home in Munich, a serious child with dark, penetrating eyes, and an unruly shock of hair that would become his trademark in later years. He was not an easy child. He was slow to speak, preferring to think carefully before expressing his thoughts, and he often seemed lost in contemplation of questions that puzzled and sometimes worried his parents. His sister Maya, born when Albert was 2 years old, would later recall that her brother seemed to inhabit a world of his own, where abstract ideas and mathematical relationships were more real and interesting than the everyday concerns of childhood. Einstein's early education began at a Catholic elementary school in Munich, where he encountered the rigid discipline and rote memorization that characterized German education in the late 19th century. The school emphasized obedience, conformity, and the mechanical repetition of facts and formulas, an approach that was fundamentally at odds with Einstein's natural curiosity and his need to understand the underlying principles behind every phenomenon he encountered. His teachers found him intelligent but difficult, capable of brilliant insights when interested, but rebellious when forced to accept information without explanation. The young Einstein's relationship with authority was complex and often contentious, reflecting a personality that respected genuine knowledge and moral courage, but chafed against arbitrary rules and meaningless restrictions. He possessed an innate sense of justice and fairness that made him sensitive to any form of oppression or discrimination, while his intellectual honesty compelled him to question conventional wisdom and seek his own understanding of truth. These characteristics would persist throughout his life, making him both a revolutionary scientist and a passionate advocate for human rights and social justice. Einstein's first encounter with the wonder of scientific thinking came when he was 4 or 5 years old, and his father showed him a magnetic compass, a simple instrument that would spark a lifelong fascination with the invisible forces that govern the behavior of matter and energy. The sight of the compass needle always pointing north, regardless of how the compass was turned or moved, filled the young boy with amazement and raised profound questions about the nature of space and the forces that act across empty distances. This early experience of scientific wonder would later inspire his famous thought experiments about the nature of electromagnetic fields and the relationship between space, time, and matter. Picture Einstein as a young boy, sitting in his father's workshop and watching the craftsmen assemble dynamos and electrical equipment while pondering the mysterious forces that made these devices work. The workshop was filled with the tools and materials of the new electrical age: copper wire, iron cores, magnets, and measuring instruments that revealed the presence of invisible currents and fields. For Einstein, the workshop was a laboratory where abstract scientific principles became concrete realities, where the mathematical equations that described electromagnetic phenomena were transformed into machines that could light cities and power factories. Einstein's introduction to mathematics came through his uncle Jakob Einstein, Hermann's brother and business partner, who possessed both the practical skills of an engineer and the theoretical knowledge of a mathematician. Jacob recognized Albert's exceptional mathematical ability and began teaching him algebra and geometry, subjects that immediately captured the boy's imagination and provided him with the tools he would need to explore the deepest questions about the nature of reality. Under Jacob's guidance, Einstein learned to see mathematics not as a collection of arbitrary rules and procedures, but as a language for describing the fundamental patterns and relationships that govern the universe. The gift of a geometry textbook when Einstein was 12 years old marked a turning point in his intellectual development, as he discovered the logical beauty and rigorous precision of Euclidean geometry. He later described this book as his sacred little geometry book, and he spent countless hours working through its proofs and theorems, marveling at the way that complex truths could be derived from simple axioms through the power of logical reasoning. The experience taught him that the human mind, through careful thought and mathematical analysis, could discover eternal truths about the structure of reality. Einstein's early religious education, which included both Jewish traditions from his family and Catholic instruction at school, exposed him to different ways of thinking about the ultimate questions of existence and meaning. While he would later abandon conventional religious beliefs, the sense of awe and reverence that characterized his childhood religious experiences would persist throughout his life, transformed into what he called cosmic religious feeling, a deep appreciation for the beauty, order, and mystery of the universe that transcended any particular theological doctrine. Picture Einstein during his early teenage years, a solitary figure walking through the streets of Munich as he pondered the great questions that would occupy his mind for the rest of his life. What is the nature of space and time? How do electromagnetic forces propagate through empty space? What is the relationship between matter and energy? These questions, which might seem abstract and irrelevant to most teenagers, were for Einstein the most important and fascinating problems in the world, worthy of a lifetime of dedicated study and reflection. The family's financial difficulties, caused by the failure of Hermann's electrical business in the face of competition from larger companies, led to the Einstein family's move to Italy in 1894, leaving 15-year-old Albert behind in Munich to complete his education at the Luitpold Gymnasium. The separation was difficult for the close-knit family, but it also provided Einstein with his first taste of independence and the opportunity to make his own decisions about his future. The experience of being alone in Munich, struggling with an educational system that he found stifling and authoritarian, strengthened his determination to pursue his own path in life, regardless of conventional expectations. Einstein's decision to leave the gymnasium without graduating and join his family in Italy was a bold and risky move that reflected both his confidence in his own abilities and his rejection of an educational system that he believed stifled creativity and independent thinking. The journey across the Alps to join his family in Milan was more than a geographical transition. It was a symbolic passage from the rigid conformity of German education to the intellectual freedom that he would need to develop his revolutionary ideas about the nature of the universe. As you continue to relax and drift towards sleep, picture the young Einstein standing on a mountain pass in the Alps, looking back toward Germany and forward toward Italy as he contemplates the uncertain but exciting future that lies ahead. He is 15 years old, a young man who has already decided that he will dedicate his life to understanding the deepest mysteries of the physical world, but who has not yet discovered the specific insights that will make him the most famous scientist in history. The boy who wondered about the invisible forces that move a compass needle is about to become the young man who will revolutionize our understanding of space, time, and the fundamental nature of reality. Chapter 2: The Student Years, 1895 to 1905. Einstein's arrival in Italy in 1895 marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life, as he experienced for the first time the intellectual freedom and cultural richness that would nurture his developing scientific genius. The Italy of the 1890s was a land of ancient beauty and modern aspirations, where Renaissance art and architecture provided daily reminders of human creativity and achievement, while the growing industrial cities of the north offered opportunities for young people with technical skills and scientific knowledge. Picture Einstein in Milan during the summer of 1895, a 16-year-old young man exploring the magnificent cathedral with its forest of Gothic spires, wandering through the galleries of the Brera Palace with their masterpieces of Renaissance painting, and walking along the Navigli, the ancient canals that Leonardo da Vinci had helped to design centuries earlier. The experience of living in a culture that celebrated artistic achievement and intellectual curiosity was liberating for someone who had felt constrained by the rigid authoritarianism of German education, and it reinforced his determination to pursue his own path in life. Einstein's decision to apply for admission to the Swiss Federal Polytechnic in Zurich was motivated by his desire to become a teacher of mathematics and physics, subjects that he believed held the key to understanding the fundamental nature of reality. Switzerland represented everything that appealed to Einstein's temperament: political freedom, intellectual tolerance, and a tradition of scientific excellence that had produced some of Europe's greatest mathematicians and physicists. The Swiss Federal Polytechnic, in particular, was known for its progressive approach to education and its emphasis on practical problem-solving rather than rote memorization. The entrance examination for the Polytechnic, which Einstein took in October 1895, revealed both his exceptional ability in mathematics and physics and his weaknesses in languages and other subjects that required memorization rather than understanding. His failure to gain immediate admission was disappointing but not surprising, given his unconventional educational background and his youth. At 16, he was 2 years younger than most applicants. However, his performance in the scientific subjects was so impressive that he was encouraged to complete his secondary education at the Cantonal School in Aarau and reapply the following year. Picture Einstein during his year at the Cantonal School in Aarau, living with the family of Jost Winteler, a teacher and educational reformer who became a surrogate father to the young man who was far from his own family. The Winteler household was filled with intellectual curiosity, political discussion, and musical performance, creating an atmosphere that was perfectly suited to Einstein's developing interests and abilities. The school itself was a revelation, with teachers who encouraged questions and independent thinking rather than demanding blind obedience to authority. It was during his time in Aarau that Einstein first formulated the thought experiment that would eventually lead to his special theory of relativity. What would it be like to ride alongside a beam of light? This seemingly simple question revealed a profound contradiction in the physics of the time, which held that light was a wave that propagated through a medium called the ether, while also maintaining that the speed of light was constant, regardless of the motion of the observer. Einstein's intuitive understanding that something was fundamentally wrong with this picture would drive his scientific research for the next decade. Einstein's successful completion of his studies at Aarau and his admission to the Swiss Federal Polytechnic in 1896 marked the beginning of 4 years of intensive study in mathematics and physics, subjects that would provide him with the tools he needed to revolutionize our understanding of the universe. The Polytechnic was one of Europe's leading technical institutions, with a faculty that included some of the most distinguished scientists and mathematicians of the time, and a curriculum that emphasized both theoretical understanding and practical application. Picture Einstein in the lecture halls and laboratories of the Polytechnic, a serious young man with penetrating eyes and an unruly shock of hair, listening intently to lectures on electromagnetic theory, thermodynamics, and mathematical analysis, while mentally questioning every assumption and exploring every implication. His professors recognized his exceptional ability, but were sometimes frustrated by his tendency to skip classes and pursue his own interests rather than following the prescribed curriculum. His approach to learning was fundamentally different from that of his classmates. While they focused on mastering the material that would be covered on examinations, Einstein was more interested in understanding the deep principles that unified apparently disparate phenomena. Einstein's friendship with Marcel Grossmann, a fellow student who would later become a distinguished mathematician, was crucial to his success at the Polytechnic and his subsequent scientific career. Grossmann was a meticulous student who took careful notes and understood the importance of mastering the technical details that Einstein sometimes overlooked in his pursuit of broader understanding. Their collaboration was a perfect complement of Einstein's intuitive genius and Grossmann's mathematical rigor, a partnership that would prove essential when Einstein later needed advanced mathematical tools to formulate his general theory of relativity. The relationship between Einstein and Mileva Maric, a Serbian physics student who was one of the few women at the Polytechnic, added a romantic dimension to his student years, while also providing him with an intellectual companion who shared his passion for physics and mathematics. Mileva was a serious student who had overcome significant obstacles to pursue her scientific education, and her understanding of advanced mathematics and physics made her a valuable collaborator in Einstein's early research. Their correspondence during periods of separation reveals the depth of their intellectual partnership and their shared excitement about the revolutionary ideas that Einstein was beginning to develop. Picture Einstein and Mileva during long walks along Lake Zurich, discussing the latest developments in physics and mathematics, while the snow-capped Alps provided a magnificent backdrop to their conversations about the fundamental nature of space time and matter. These discussions were more than romantic interludes. They were collaborative explorations of the deepest questions in physics, conducted by two young people who believed that they could unlock secrets that had eluded the greatest scientists of previous generations. Einstein's graduation from the Polytechnic in 1900 with a degree in mathematics and physics should have opened the door to an academic career, but his unconventional approach to his studies and his sometimes difficult relationship with his professors made it difficult for him to find a position as a research assistant or lecturer. The rejection letters that he received from universities across Europe were disappointing but not entirely surprising, given his reputation as a brilliant but undisciplined student who was more interested in pursuing his own ideas than in following established research programs. The birth of Einstein's daughter Liesl in 1902, before his marriage to Mileva, created personal complications that added to the stress of his unsuccessful job search and his precarious financial situation. The fate of Liesl remains one of the mysteries of Einstein's biography, as she disappears from the historical record after infancy, but her existence reveals the human dimension of the young scientist's life and the personal sacrifices that accompanied his pursuit of scientific understanding. Einstein's appointment as a technical expert third class at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern in 1902 was not the academic position he had hoped for, but it proved to be the perfect environment for the development of his revolutionary ideas about space, time, and the nature of physical reality. The patent office required him to evaluate applications for new inventions, work that sharpened his ability to identify the essential features of complex technical problems while providing him with a steady income and enough free time to pursue his own research. Picture Einstein in his office at the patent office, examining applications for new electrical devices and mechanical inventions, while his mind wandered to the deeper questions about the nature of electromagnetic fields and the relationship between space and time. The work was intellectually stimulating in its own way, as it required him to understand how abstract scientific principles could be applied to practical problems. But it also left him with enough mental energy to tackle the fundamental questions that would lead to his greatest discoveries. The formation of the Olympia Academy with his friends Konrad Habicht and Maurice Solovin provided Einstein with the intellectual companionship and philosophical stimulation that he needed during his years at the patent office. The three young men met regularly to discuss the works of great philosophers and scientists, from Plato and Spinoza to Mach and Poincaré, exploring the fundamental questions about the nature of knowledge, reality, and scientific method that would inform Einstein's approach to physics throughout his career. Picture the three friends in Einstein's modest apartment in Bern, surrounded by books and papers as they debated the nature of space and time, the relationship between mathematics and physical reality, and the philosophical implications of the latest developments in physics and mathematics. These discussions were more than academic exercises. They were explorations of the conceptual foundations that would support Einstein's revolutionary insights about the nature of the universe. Einstein's marriage to Mileva in 1903 and the birth of their son Hans Albert in 1904 brought new responsibilities and joys to his life. But they also created additional pressures as he struggled to balance his family obligations with his scientific ambitions. The small apartment in Bern became a center of both domestic life and scientific research, where Einstein would work on his revolutionary papers while caring for his infant son and maintaining his duties at the patent office. As you continue your peaceful journey towards sleep, imagine Einstein in his study during the winter of 1904 to 1905, working late into the night on the ideas that would transform physics while his family slept peacefully in the next room. He is 25 years old, an unknown patent clerk who is about to publish a series of papers that will revolutionize our understanding of the universe. But he does not yet know that he is on the verge of the greatest scientific breakthrough since Newton. The young man who wondered what it would be like to ride alongside a beam of light is about to discover that space and time are not the fixed stage on which events unfold, but dynamic participants in the cosmic drama that connects all things in ways that no one had previously imagined. Chapter 3: The Miracle Year, 1905. The year 1905 stands as one of the most remarkable in the history of science, a 12-month period during which Albert Einstein, still working as a patent clerk in Bern, published 5 papers that would fundamentally transform our understanding of the physical world and establish him as one of the greatest scientists who ever lived. These papers, written by a 26-year-old man who had no academic position and no access to a research laboratory, addressed some of the most profound questions in physics and provided answers that were so revolutionary that it would take decades for the scientific community to fully appreciate their implications. Picture Einstein in his modest apartment on Kramgasse in Bern during the early months of 1905, working at a small desk by the window while the sounds of the medieval city drifted up from the cobblestone streets below. The room was simply furnished with books and papers scattered across every available surface, while the walls were decorated with portraits of his scientific heroes: Newton, Maxwell, and Faraday, the giants whose work had laid the foundation for his own revolutionary insights. The atmosphere was one of intense concentration and creative excitement, as Einstein grappled with problems that had puzzled physicists for decades. The first of Einstein's great papers of 1905 dealt with the photoelectric effect, a phenomenon that had been discovered years earlier but never satisfactorily explained by classical physics. When light strikes certain metals, it causes them to emit electrons, but the energy of these electrons depends on the frequency of the light rather than its intensity, a result that contradicted the wave theory of light that had dominated physics since the early 19th century. Einstein's solution was both elegant and revolutionary. He proposed that light consists of discrete packets of energy, later called photons, whose energy is proportional to their frequency. Picture Einstein as he worked through the mathematical details of his photon theory, using the quantum hypothesis that Max Planck had introduced 5 years earlier to explain the spectrum of blackbody radiation. Einstein realized that Planck's quantum concept was not just a mathematical trick for solving a specific problem, but a fundamental feature of nature that revealed the granular structure of energy itself. His paper on the photoelectric effect was the first to fully embrace the quantum nature of light and to recognize its profound implications for our understanding of the relationship between matter and radiation. The second major paper of Einstein's miracle year addressed the reality of atoms and molecules, providing the first convincing theoretical explanation for Brownian motion, the random movement of microscopic particles suspended in a fluid that had been observed by botanist Robert Brown in 1827. Einstein showed that this apparently chaotic motion was actually the result of collisions between the suspended particles and the invisible molecules of the surrounding fluid, and he derived mathematical formulas that could be used to determine the size and number of molecules from observations of Brownian motion. Picture Einstein in the patent office, taking a break from examining applications for new inventions to work on his theory of Brownian motion, using statistical mechanics and probability theory to connect the microscopic world of atoms and molecules with the macroscopic world of observable phenomena. His analysis was a masterpiece of theoretical physics, demonstrating how abstract mathematical concepts could be used to reveal the hidden structure of matter, and providing experimental physicists with a practical method for measuring fundamental constants like Avogadro's number. The third paper, submitted to the journal Annalen de Physique on June 30, 1905, contained Einstein's special theory of relativity, perhaps the most famous scientific theory of the 20th century, and certainly one of the most revolutionary. The paper, modestly titled On the Electrodynamics of Moving Bodies, began with Einstein's recognition that the laws of physics should be the same for all observers moving at constant velocity relative to each other, a principle that he called the principle of relativity. Combined with the assumption that the speed of light is constant for all observers, this principle led to conclusions that contradicted common sense and centuries of scientific thinking about the nature of space and time. Picture Einstein as he worked through the implications of his two fundamental postulates, using thought experiments and mathematical analysis to explore the consequences of assuming that the speed of light is the same for all observers regardless of their motion. The results were startling. Space and time were not absolute and independent as Newton had assumed, but were intimately connected in a four-dimensional continuum that Einstein called space-time. Moving clocks run slow, moving objects contract in the direction of motion, and events that are simultaneous for one observer may not be simultaneous for another. The mathematical framework of special relativity was relatively simple, involving little more than algebra and basic calculus, but its conceptual implications were profound and far-reaching. Einstein showed that space and time were not the fixed stage on which physical events unfold, but dynamic participants in those events, affected by motion and affecting the behavior of matter and energy. The theory unified space and time into a single entity, revealed the deep connection between matter and energy, and provided a new foundation for understanding the fundamental laws of nature. Einstein's fourth paper of 1905, submitted in September as a brief addendum to his relativity paper, contained what would become the most famous equation in the history of science, E=mc2. This deceptively simple formula revealed that mass and energy are different manifestations of the same underlying reality, and that even a small amount of matter contains an enormous amount of energy. The implications of this mass-energy equivalence would not be fully realized until decades later, when it became the theoretical foundation for nuclear power and nuclear weapons. Picture Einstein as he derived his famous equation, recognizing that it represented far more than a mathematical curiosity or theoretical abstraction. He understood that E=mc2 revealed a fundamental truth about the nature of reality, that matter and energy are interconvertible, that the mass of an object is a measure of its energy content, and that the universe contains vast stores of energy locked within the atomic structure of ordinary matter. The equation would later provide the key to understanding how stars shine, how elements are created in stellar furnaces, and how the universe itself evolved from the Big Bang. The fifth paper of Einstein's miracle year dealt with his doctoral dissertation, a theoretical study of the size of molecules that provided another approach to determining Avogadro's number and confirming the atomic theory of matter. While less revolutionary than his other work of 1905, the dissertation demonstrated Einstein's mastery of statistical mechanics and his ability to connect theoretical predictions with experimental observations, skills that would serve him well throughout his career. The immediate reaction to Einstein's papers was mixed, reflecting both the revolutionary nature of his ideas and the conservative tendencies of the scientific establishment. Some physicists, particularly the younger generation, immediately recognized the importance of his work and began to explore its implications, while others remained skeptical of theories that contradicted common sense and challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of space and time. Max Planck, one of the most respected physicists of the time, was among the first to appreciate the significance of Einstein's relativity theory and to begin developing its mathematical consequences. Picture Einstein continuing his work at the Patent Office throughout 1905 and beyond, examining applications for new inventions, while the scientific world slowly began to recognize that a revolution in physics was underway. His colleagues at the Patent Office had no idea that the quiet young man who evaluated technical drawings and patent applications was simultaneously transforming our understanding of the universe, developing theories that would eventually change the course of human history and establish him as one of the greatest scientists who ever lived. The experimental confirmation of Einstein's predictions began almost immediately, as physicists around the world designed experiments to test the implications of his theories. The photoelectric effect was confirmed in detail by Robert Millikan, who initially set out to disprove Einstein's photon theory, but ended up providing its strongest experimental support. Brownian motion experiments confirmed Einstein's predictions about molecular motion and provided accurate measurements of Avogadro's number. The predictions of special relativity were tested and confirmed in experiments with high-speed particles and precise measurements of time dilation and length contraction. Einstein's growing reputation as a theoretical physicist of exceptional ability led to his first academic appointment in 1908, when he became a private docent at the University of Bern, teaching courses on thermodynamics and the kinetic theory of gases while continuing his research on the fundamental problems of physics. The transition from patent clerk to university lecturer marked the beginning of his academic career, but it also represented a recognition by the scientific community that his work was of fundamental importance and deserved serious attention. Picture Einstein in his first university lecture hall, a young professor with wild hair and penetrating eyes, explaining the principles of thermodynamics to a small group of students, while his mind was already working on the next great problem in physics, the extension of relativity theory to include gravity and acceleration. The special theory of relativity had revealed the deep connection between space and time, but Einstein realized that it was incomplete, applicable only to objects moving at constant velocity and unable to account for the effects of gravitational fields. The recognition that gravity and acceleration are equivalent, which Einstein later called the happiest thought of my life, came to him in 1907 as he sat in his chair at the patent office and imagined what it would feel like to fall freely in a gravitational field. He realized that a person in free fall would not feel the effects of gravity, just as a person in an accelerating elevator would feel a force that was indistinguishable from gravity. This insight, known as the equivalence principle, would become the foundation for his general theory of relativity and lead to an even more revolutionary understanding of space, time, and gravity. As you continue your peaceful journey towards sleep, imagine Einstein on a quiet evening in 1905, walking along the Aare River in Bern as he contemplates the implications of the theories he has just developed. He is 26 years old, a young man who has just revolutionized physics, but who does not yet fully understand the magnitude of his achievement or the impact it will have on human understanding of the universe. The patent clerk, who wondered about the nature of light and the structure of space and time, has become the scientist who showed us that reality is far stranger and more beautiful than anyone had previously imagined, and his greatest discoveries still lie ahead. Chapter 4: The Berlin Years, 1914 to 1933. Einstein's move to Berlin in 1914 marked the beginning of the most productive and tumultuous period of his scientific career, as he joined the Prussian Academy of Sciences and began work on the general theory of relativity that would establish him as the greatest physicist since Newton. Berlin was the intellectual capital of the German-speaking world, home to some of Europe's most distinguished scientists and mathematicians, and the perfect environment for Einstein to develop the revolutionary ideas that had been gestating in his mind since his recognition of the equivalence principle in 1907. Picture Einstein arriving in Berlin on a spring day in 1914, traveling by train through the German countryside, as Europe stood on the brink of the catastrophic war that would reshape the continent and transform the political landscape of the entire world. The city that welcomed him was a magnificent imperial capital, with grand boulevards, imposing government buildings, and world-class cultural institutions that reflected Germany's emergence as one of Europe's great powers. The University of Berlin and the Prussian Academy of Sciences were at the center of this intellectual ferment, attracting scholars and researchers from around the world. Einstein's appointment to the Prussian Academy was a recognition of his growing stature as a theoretical physicist and provided him with the freedom to pursue his research without the burden of teaching responsibilities or administrative duties. The position was ideal for someone of Einstein's temperament and interests, allowing him to focus entirely on the fundamental problems of physics, while providing him with access to the resources and intellectual stimulation of one of Europe's premier scientific institutions. The outbreak of World War I in August 1914 created a crisis of conscience for Einstein, whose pacifist convictions and international outlook put him at odds with the nationalist fervor that swept through German intellectual circles. While his colleagues at the Academy signed manifestos supporting the German war effort and defending the invasion of Belgium, Einstein refused to endorse what he saw as militaristic propaganda and instead began to develop the humanitarian and political concerns that would characterize his later years. Picture Einstein in his study during the early months of the war, working on the mathematical foundations of general relativity, while the sounds of military parades and patriotic demonstrations drifted through his windows from the streets of Berlin. The contrast between the abstract beauty of his theoretical work and the brutal reality of the conflict raging across Europe was stark and troubling, reinforcing his conviction that science should serve humanity rather than the narrow interests of any particular nation or political system. The development of general relativity required Einstein to master mathematical techniques that were far more sophisticated than anything he had used in his earlier work, particularly the tensor calculus that had been developed by mathematicians like Riemann and Ricci to describe curved spaces and non-Euclidean geometries. His collaboration with Marcel Grossmann, his old friend from the Polytechnic, was crucial during this period, as Grossmann provided the mathematical expertise that Einstein needed to translate his physical insights into rigorous mathematical form. Einstein's recognition that gravity is not a force in the traditional sense, but rather a manifestation of the curvature of space-time caused by the presence of matter and energy, was one of the most profound insights in the history of physics. According to general relativity, massive objects like stars and planets create depressions in the fabric of space-time, and other objects move along the straightest possible paths through this curved geometry, which we perceive as gravitational attraction. Picture Einstein as he worked through the field equations of general relativity, using tensor calculus to describe how matter and energy determine the curvature of space-time and how this curvature, in turn, determines the motion of matter and energy. The mathematics was extraordinarily complex, involving systems of non-linear partial differential equations that were far more difficult to solve than anything in classical physics. But the physical picture that emerged was elegant and beautiful. Gravity as geometry, space-time as a dynamic participant in physical processes rather than a passive stage on which events unfold. The completion of general relativity in November 1915 was the culmination of 8 years of intense theoretical work and represented Einstein's greatest scientific achievements. The theory provided a new understanding of gravity that encompassed and extended Newton's law of universal gravitation, while making predictions that could be tested through astronomical observations and laboratory experiments. Einstein's calculation of the perihelion advance of Mercury, which had puzzled astronomers for decades, provided the first